to the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Mats Podcast. And you all probably know it's me, it's Dante. I'm here. I'm always here. I should lend this out to some people that are like, yo, y'all trying to do an episode, and I should just like fall into the background and let other people do my show now. We'll do that in the 300s. So anyhow, for this episode, I have a guest on that. This is, I guess we can say this is still part of the Dante wellness and take care of yourself theme of 2024, because every time I have somebody on in this pocket, it's me learning and getting some information so I can apply to my life. So I want to welcome to the show today Mr. Mike Leng. And Mike is a nutritionist. Yes. And Mike reached out and, got to looking around. I was like, you know what? This is going to be perfect. This is going to be perfect because I got some questions, and, we just had some guests on recently, talk about other health areas as well as far as fitness goes, and then just nutrition, period. So I want to welcome to the podcast, Mr. Mike Leng. Welcome to the show, man. How you feeling?
I'm good, man. Thank you very, very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, absolutely. No. Thank you for making the time. And, my whole thing is, whenever anyone gives up their time to do, my podcast, I'm super appreciative because, I'm just some dude in this basement, talking to strangers. So whenever strangers want to talk to me as a stranger, I'm like, dude, like we click.
It's a good thing about jiu-jitsu, isn't it? It's kind of a very much a universal language. Wherever you go in the world, you'll generally find good people who generally will have good conversations, and if they've got jiu-jitsu in common. So,
yeah. I have a friend from Ireland that came over a couple years ago, and yes, we connected through jiu-jitsu, but we talked very little jiu-jitsu. We talked more like we both collect action figures, so we ended up talking a lot about our collections and then family. And then jiu-jitsu was kind of secondary, but it was neat knowing that we had that kind of in our back pocket. If, we got any questions for, how's the jiu-jitsu scene over there in Ireland and vice versa. So jiu-jitsu connects that, no matter where you go.
I did see as well, while I was looking into podcasts and things like that, that you're a big comic book fan and you collect action figures and stuff. Like, I'm a huge comic book fan. So I'll try and keep it nutrition based and not comic book based. I did a podcast a few years ago. There's unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but a great guy called John Meadows that's more in the bodybuilding type space. And he really loved kind of the classic Silver Age of Silver Surfer and Galactus and cosmic stuff. So we spent the entire podcast just talking about comic books and not actually anything to do with nutrition. So then we just remembered at the end that we should probably wedge a little bit in. So I'll try and kind of stay on topic as much as I can.
Hey, it's happened before, and I've had teammates on where we're like, hey, let's talk about your upcoming fight. Then we start talking about comic book movies, and then the last 20 minutes like, oh yeah, by the way, we should get to the topic at hand. So I feel you, and honestly, if you want, we could do another episode and we can nerd out on that next episode too. So but
I'd nerd out more on that than I would nerd out on nutrition, which is a big statement. So I don't think anybody has that much free time to talk to me about stuff like TV shows and movies and stuff because there's so much happening at the moment. I could go forever and ever across other stuff as well. Obviously Rings of Power drops tomorrow. Then we've got Acolyte just got axed, and I'm a massive Star Wars fan and stuff like that. So, and I'm already doing it. I'm already trying to go off kilter. So I'm sorry.
No. Trust me, we'll talk at the end. We're going to set that up because we clearly have other stuff to talk about as well. But here, the task in front of us. So the unorthodox nutrition. So where did the name come from as far as like that, like, being unorthodox? And then, what got you into the nutrition pocket in general? Like,
Yeah.
like, how'd you get interested in that?
So, firstly, it's the worst name that anybody has ever come up with for a nutrition company, because everybody just kind of assumes, if they don't know me, that I'm going to do like loads of weird and wacky like stuff that's like crazy just because of the name. It kind of How it came about is when I started the company like 16 years ago. I basically was after a name, and I basically wore a ring all the time that had a symbol on it that was like a Celtic symbol from my family, and it just meant like an unorthodox way of doing things, like finding your own way. And I really like that. And it's the symbol that's still on all the branding stuff. It's like the circular symbol. Um, so I just decided that because I really love it. There was no kind of thought behind it. Now, obviously, 16 years later, like it was terrible from a branding standpoint, but here we are. So it's not been that bad. Um, Now, how I started was quite bizarre, really. So, I was a very, very active teenager, very active kid. But then towards my late teens, obviously over here in the UK, you can start drinking and going to pubs from when you're 18. Kind of got absorbed in that lifestyle, became quite overweight, stopped doing martial arts and all the things that kind of like kept me active. So I put on a lot of weight. So then kind of rediscovered like in my 20s. It was like MMA through a friend who like watched like the UFC, and he's like, "Oh, you've got to watch this dude, it's crazy." And then started to kind of get back into that. And so it was my basically what happened was it was me myself as I started to lose weight myself and look into nutrition. It's really kind of like the nutrition side of it really kind of interested me deeply, and I would just kind of go deeper and deeper. And then back then, you'll probably remember before like social media, we had things like a lot of people won't know who listen, but these things called forums that were on websites. And there used to be, it's still a massive MMA organization in Europe called Cage Warriors, but they had like a forum based on their website. And there used to be a nutrition section there. And I just spent all my time in there, hanging out, answering questions for people when they would post and stuff like that. And then it just got to the point where people would then start to come up to me and go, "Hi, would you do me a nutrition plan?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then it just kind of built like slowly from there. And then I just did for more people, and then they got great results. And then I did more, invested more in my own education, and it's just kind of built and built and built from there, like starting out there to where we are now, 16 years later. So all kind of like self-taught. I hold my hands up that I'm not kind of like I'm not a registered dietitian or like an RD or anything like that. Any kind of medical scope and stuff like that is well outside of my practice, and something that I don't touch at all. I was very very clear with people. Like I'm like a nutritionist around like kind of sport, predominantly combat sport, MMA, jiu-jitsu, Thai, boxing, quite a few screamer stick fighters. But I also do kind of like CrossFit and things like that. High rocks is really, really popular at the moment. And then quite weirdly, I also have quite a large portion of the GB Paralympic table tennis team, which is like that just kind of started from a referral and just built on itself. But they're currently in Paris now doing the Olympics. So that's exciting times as well. So good diverse thing, but obviously my passion and the main thing that I do is jiu-jitsu and MMA, working with everybody from white belt all the way through to IBJJF world champs, Polaris world champs, Grapple Fest, Grapple Max, UFC fighters, like pretty much, and then are like hobbyists and anything and everything in between. So a pretty broad kind of bunch there.
Okay. Yeah, that I was wondering that, in terms of just working, who you like, who you work with, and is there, kind of a level as far as like, well, I want to work with the higher level athletes, and I don't, versus like the hobbyists or the casuals who are like, look, I just have a few questions, because I fit in that pocket where I'm just like, look, man, I like pastries. Like I don't even, not even, I love pastries. So, I'd be that guy that's like, hey, is there a way I can get around this and still eat 6 honey buns like every 3 days? Like, answers usually no, but, those are the kind of questions that I, as a hobbyist, would come up with, as I'm about to go train and like, all right, man, I'm about to go hit these mats. Let me go ahead and
Yeah.
hit the 7-Eleven first and then get off the mats feeling like crap. And then it's like, ugh, let's go to 7-Eleven again. Like eat those emotions.
Especially if you've had a bad training session and got smashed by everybody. Um, so, to be honest, the majority of the people that I work with fall into the hobbyist kind of category. People with families, other responsibilities, and jiu-jitsu is very much a hobby for them. They're looking to, have more muscle, less fat, perform better, feel better, but still juggle everything with everyday life. And then obviously working with, there's still a huge proportion of people in jiu-jitsu who are very, very good, but still have like full-time jobs, etc. And then there's the very top of the spot. What you'll generally find is that um, the people at the very, very top of the sport would be at the top of the sport regardless. Everybody's seen like, stories of guys uh, like Gordon Ryan and Gary Tonin and all these people who like, John Danner's being very vocal on like things like, they just eat junk all the time and they're like incredible. Those kind of athletes would always be at the top, but those kind of athletes, the difference between winning and losing is the tiniest, tiniest of margins. So they're after the tiniest amounts of improvement. Like if you look, a classic example is that I've said to a lot of people recently is if you go up the 100 meters that was in the past Olympics and look at the end photo, like the difference between first and last place was like 0.00 of a second. So it's the tiniest margins that we're after. But with hobbyists, it's not just much the tiniest things. There's a lot of work around that you can kind of do for that. Like I'm not saying people can eat 600 buns, but they might be able to have like 2 or 3, especially after like big hard training sessions and things like that. Like they are the ones who are probably going to get the most from it because those good habits and good things that you can put in place, they're going to see like a bigger return, especially if they've got like, everyday stresses of work, family, other kind of responsibilities where the guys at the top of the sport, literally all they do is eat, train and sleep, maybe teach seminars or classes and stuff. So it's sometimes a lot more rewarding to get like big health changes off the people who are the hobbyists in the middle than the guys at the very, very top.
Sure, that makes sense. As I think about myself, in back in January, I never do the New Year's resolution thing. It's just always been silly to me because I would always start when I was younger, and by the time February hits, I was like, this shit's dumb. But this year, because it landed on a Monday, I'm very much like life has to start on a Monday because that's the work week. But since the first was on the Monday, I just decided, we're gonna, we're gonna buckle down and start eating better. So working out a little bit. And, I saw, huge, leaps, just, within the first, month, like less than a month. And, again, being in that pocket of, just the everyday person, of course, yeah, you're going to see those things because, you've got a lot to work with. Whereas again, like you said, someone like Gary Tonin, Gordon Ryan, Nicky Rod, fellas like that, it's almost like there's no margin. The margin of error is like so like, tiny that it's like, okay, well, they might have a honey bun that one day and the whole ship falls apart. So I get you.
Like kind of like they'll have periods, obviously, like going up to recently, like CGI and things like that. It was just ADCC. Everybody, I still forget that ADCC happened. Everybody's like kind of like still focusing on CGI so much. But all the guys going through the prep for that, like they will have been very, very focused. But I guarantee, like after that or before their camp starts, they will have been like much more relaxed. But I know like Nicky Rod and stuff is very switched on with his food and stuff like that, and a lot of others. So like if you had $1 million on the line, you're going to really kind of like, switch it on, like, and give you that level of focus that you might not have had before.
Yeah, when you put money like that on the table, I it's pretty easy to get in character because you tell me $1 million is at stake and I'm getting a black belt in 3 years. Call
Yeah.
me the next BJ Penn.
Mm.
Um,
One of the things that I was really surprised by the event like as a whole was how many taps that you saw. Like I genuinely thought like going into this, like there was no way anybody would tap. Like I thought that, especially like in the later quarters, semis and things like that, that you would have to put people to sleep or just destroy knees like before you would tap. Like I didn't think anybody would ever tap to a rear naked choke, like with $1 million on the line, because the worst is that you're going to sleep, like which
yeah,
sucks, but you've lost. But for $1 million, like I'm quite surprised that I don't know if it's a reflex that's just kind of drummed into you, after thousands and thousands of hours of training that you just instinctively tap when it's like that. Um, but I was very surprised. I literally thought coming into this event, like this is going to be carnage. No one is tapping to anything for $1 million. So, but it just goes to show you.
well, I think you kind of nailed something there, though. Probably just reflex. Just because in the training room we're going to tap. We're
Yeah, yeah,
most folks aren't going to sleep. There are a couple people who are out there that it's like I'm going to sleep. It was like, dude,
yeah,
it is practice. But
yeah.
even on a Saturday night, the UFC 305, Israel Adesanya, he tapped in the main
Yeah.
event to a rear naked
Mhm.
choke. And I'm sitting here with my neighbors, and I got to talking about it. I was like, wow, that's crazy, because you think back to UFC, was it 200, I think, where oh no, not 200, prior, where Holly Holm, she lost to Misha Tate by rear naked
Mhm.
choke, and she was still throwing punches on her
Yeah,
way to going unconscious. And
yeah, yeah,
it was just one of those things where, like, I was talking about, I was like, wow, that's crazy, because Izzy has been in fights when I think he was fighting Kelvin Gastelum, and going into the fifth round, you can see him say, I'm willing to die for this.
yeah. That it's such like a poignant clip, that isn't it? And he's talking about it, like it's showing so much of like him stood up against like the back of the cage, like, and he's looking at him and he was like, "I'm ready to die." Like you can see it in his face. You're like, "Oh my god!" Like I'm going to have to kill this dude to stop him.
Yeah,
But then you like tap as well. I don't know. It might be. I think it's just a thing that's like, if you think how many like rounds that you do over your lifetime and how many times that you tap, just in drilling as well. Like as an ingrained skill, like in a typical like 90-minute or 2 hour session, you must tap. If you suck like me, like 100 times, like um but so maybe it becomes like a reflex, you know what I mean? In that minute, like your body just takes over and does it. Like I can understand like arm bars and like heel hooks and stuff like that, where you think could be career ending if they like destroy my arm. But for like chokes and stuff, you'd think, well, I'm just like it, they can put me to sleep. Like I'll just wake up in a second and think, why is Joe Rogan in my bedroom? But it's like it's great, but I suppose like it's very easy for me to sit here on the Off the Mats podcast and talk about I can't believe that Izzy tapped when I'm not in the cage doing it. Like that kind of pressure is insane.
oh yeah. Well, I know for myself, there are times where I'm being choked, and look, I'm going to admit, sometimes I'm a little dumb, and I get to that point where I'm forgetting the tap. I'm
Mm,
sitting there being choked, and the room starts to get fuzzy, and I'm like, oh shit, I should tap here. Like,
mm.
duh, like we're not playing. Well, we're playing, but we're not playing. Like, I can go to sleep, and I could probably pee myself right here, and I'd probably just change gyms, probably leave the state, maybe, because ain't nobody. They gonna get the cameras on, like, BJJ Wiki pissed himself. Fuck you guys. Um, but yeah, it's easy for us to sit here and kind of wonder about it. But it is interesting, though, to think, like, with that kind of money on the line, and to chokes, they're tapping it,
Yeah,
probably just a reflex. It could be that also research and stuff. Maybe there's new studies coming out saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't go out like that. I don't know, maybe there's some things that are coming up, so I'm not sure, but I know I tap. If
yeah,
I'm on
hundred
my way
percent.
out, tap.
there's obviously a bunch of stuff coming out about CTE and things like that, where more and more big gyms, especially in MMA sparring, don't really spar hard all the time. It's only very kind of limited and stuff like that, which is very, very smart. Like, I think it's a very scientific way to approach training and things like that. But I imagine going to sleep in jiu-jitsu training, you may have like a number attached to it, same as what you do, taking big shots in the gym. So I can't imagine going to sleep repeatedly being choked out is great for you. You know what I mean? Like, it's, but there's no one who's going to kind of as well do a scientific study where they kind of like get, a randomized control group of people and say, right, we're going to repeatedly just choke you unconscious and then monitor it. Like, that's never getting signed off anywhere. But
I know a few guys that'll probably sign up for that quick. Like, you know what? Let's test it. Like,
yeah.
Yikes.
I don't recommend anybody doing this. Please, no gym decide to take this upon themselves to find out.
I can see it now. Like, come November or December, you just see these tests now coming up. Like, oh shit. Like, I guess on the one note, it was like, holy shit, people listen. But on the other note, it was like, ooh, don't that, like, maybe don't listen like to that though.
I'm going to get sued. I'm going to get so sued.
Like, oh boy. But yeah, looking at competition to that level though, it's like those guys, they're dialed in, when it comes to, even not just having money on the line like that, but just when you're a top flight competitor, you have to imagine that, every little thing that they do, right down to, not just how much sleep, but the quality of sleep, the quality of food, the quality of your workout. It's like, there are times when I work out, it's like, I just like the idea of like, look, I did something today. There's always that saying, it's like doing something is better than doing nothing. But then you have guys on that level where it's like, it can't just be something. It has to have meaning, whether it be I'm working, this body part, or if I'm, doing, yoga or whatever, it has to have some purpose. So, when you get to that level, like we we're saying with the casual, grappler, in their diet, we're going to see those big returns, and we're going to be excited because, that's huge for us. But, those cats on that higher level, it's like, they don't have time for that. They're not going to really be seeing the big returns. It's like micro, micro gains at that point, but every little bit counts.
It does, yeah. Like, and it's kind of like a cumulative thing as well. These guys are like careers of thousands and thousands of hours. So the more that they kind of take that stuff, it's kind of like a compound interest effect that they're getting towards the end. It's if they just all of a sudden start, pay attention to their nutrition, their sleep, their stress management, their strength and conditioning for one camp. Yes, they're probably going to see a change, but it's probably not going to be as profound as what you think. And generally, because these people as well, especially in the UFC and things like that, generally we're seeing more and more like genetically inclined people coming into the UFC. Like, if you look at like the earlier UFCs, like under 100, it was like a million different body types in all different kinds of things. Now, when you look at it, it's all very, very similar because it's kind of like it's just leading itself, same as all other sports that, genetically, like, people of certain dispositions like rise to the top. We're starting to see now more genetically gifted athletes coming in to, like, the UFC, even like all the way to like heavyweight. Like, you've got, guys like obviously John Jones is a complete genetic freak. Like, his family is like he's I think the smallest of his brothers, like, who both played the NFL, which is the scariest thing that like ever. But then you've got guys like Tom Aspinall and things like that who are coming through now that are moving like like middleweights, and they're absolutely insanely large humans. So they're going to not see as a pronounced return on that kind of investment of putting it into the nutrition and things like that. But it's definitely going to play a much bigger part for them than someone who doesn't do it at all. They will have like that advantage over it, and that's what they're kind of after, those like small advantages, because it's how many clips have you seen in the UFC and things like that of where somebody's beating the punch, you know what I mean? And it's like a gazillionth of a second faster. Or you look to the IBJJF like worlds where people win by advantages, mostly in black belt divisions and things like that. Like, So, or any kind of like EBI overtime when EBI was going, like how many matches were running those final seconds and things like that. So it's a game of millimeters at the top, unfortunately, which is vastly different to like hobbyists and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have, fighters like Paddy the Baddy, who
Yeah.
looks great fight night, and then as soon as it's over, he looks pregnant. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm
So
gonna go eat.
so I actually know Paul, his nutritionist, quite well in the strength and conditioning course, Paul Reed. Big shout out to Paul Reed. He's been going a long, long time. One of the like OGs of the game. Paddy actually now stays like a lot leaner between his fights. Like he doesn't do that massive blow that he used to. But that was kind of a very personal choice for him. But he still had to really like work hard to get it off. But I think he's now kind of realised, especially as he's getting older, that it's not really worth killing myself before I even start camp. So I'm able to do it. Molly McCann's another classic example. Like, like unfortunately, like she hasn't had as good a results recently. But if you look at like her body type and how that's changed over the years, these fighters are now staying like a lot leaner between camps and things like that. There isn't that massive like yo-yo effect that we used to see. Like I think Paddy obviously still puts on quite a bit. Like famously, after his last fight, it was everywhere that he was eating pizza like instantly after with Tom Aspinall. But I don't think he blows up anywhere near as like what he used to when he was, a 19-year-old lad like fighting where he could easily just drop it. Now he's got two young kids as well, so his sleep's destroyed. So that's probably played a big part as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, yeah. When you're younger, you for sure, it's you're indestructible. You're
Yeah,
invincible, so you can do crazy things like that. But yeah, as you get wiser, more mature, and your body starts to change. I know for me, I think for me, I've been 5'9" since fifth grade. So I was 10 years old. I was 5'9". I weighed 150, and like I got to high school and they're like, oh my God, this guy, like, or before high school, they're like, this guy's going to be, a basketball player. He's going to be a great wide receiver. He's going to be so tall. And I stopped growing. I couldn't gain weight and I could eat whatever I wanted. I just would not go. I think the heaviest I got in high school was like 155.
yep,
And then, after, as I started getting into my 20s, I think I got to like 160. I was like, okay, let's start like really lifting. Then I got to like 185 and I was like, okay, now we're looking at muscle now. And I'm like, I'm feeling good. And then, the calories started catching up. It's
yep,
like, even though I'm working out hard, it's like now my nutrition though is terrible, still. And then I was like, okay, like something's different happening here. Once I got into my 30s, that's where the notice was really big. It was like, oh, as we get older, that metabolism, it becomes a trick that gets us. So for him, I'm sure as he's aging, his body's kind of getting to that point. And being an athlete like that and working your body so much, there's going to be wear and tear. And you like to think that as you work your body out and keep going, you'll always be able to rubber band and snap back to it. But, they're genetics. They're crazy
yeah.
things sometimes.
There is, yeah. But obviously, as you get older, like I'm in my 40s now, like you notice that you don't shake off the niggles as quick as what you used to. You used to like tweak an elbow or a shoulder or something in training when I was in my 20s, and like a couple of training sessions later, it's fine. But now, you carry it around for a lot longer, especially if you're not paying like good attention, like you say, nutrition, sleep, stress management, those kind of things. Like you're not putting your body in a good position to like recover from that, and you end up just carrying those niggles like longer. I do think sleep's a big part of that. As you kind of get older, it's so important. Your quality of your sleep definitely gets less when you're like in your teens and early 20s, like you would regularly sleep, like, till like late morning and things like that, get 10, 12 hours a night. And then when life kind of hits you, people get a lot less. So sleep's like like such a massive thing when it comes to like recovery and performance and things like that. So there's a load of different factors that you get. You have no stress when you're younger, that builds up. Your activity is naturally a lot higher, just because of what you do on a day-to-day basis. your activity when you start working, depending on your job, your daily activity goes down so much, like as you get older. So there's a lot of contributing factors you've got to try and mitigate through good nutrition, eating well, exercising regularly, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The sleep thing is a huge wake up call to myself. My wife and I were talking about it, how in high school, even though I could stay up and work on very minimum sleep, I always made it a point to, I'd get home from school, after practice, do homework or eat dinner, do homework, watch TV until about 9, and then, shut my body down. As I got to senior year, I'd stay up to 11. I'd watch Married with Children at 11 o'clock, and by 11:35, I was asleep, like with no issue. And once life starts to take toll, and once you get into your college years and your work life and grown up years, now it's like, okay, well, I didn't have this much time earlier in the day for this. Now I'm going to skimp on a little bit of sleep there. And then your body, even though you might think like, oh, okay, I'm fine with this, but your body starts to notice it, like, oh, I can't, as you're exercising and you're like, it seemed to be kind of at a plateau of sorts. And it's like, one of those small little details being sleep, and just those little changes could make a difference, but also too, you got to look at other things. But sleep, I know for myself, has always been an issue to a point now where it's just a running joke in the house where my wife, she works nights and she'll come home and she'll, did you sleep well? Did you sleep okay last night? And I'm like, like kind of like, meanwhile, I'm texting her at 3 a.m, like memes. It's like, the answer to this. I text you at 3:30.
Yeah. But like, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, like the data is incredibly like conclusive now of how important sleep is, not only for general health, but also for like fat loss, muscle gain, overall recovery, but also like things like cognitive ability, like memory recall, your ability to absorb and turn information into knowledge, i.e., learning techniques in jiu-jitsu. So it's a massive thing. And we are also, there's like really clear data now. We all know those kind of people who say, I only get 2-3 hours sleep and I'm fine. Like on a long enough timeline, we've seen now that they also like really do start to suffer like negative effects of it. So it's one of the things where it's the biggest recovery modality that you can have, or one of the big two, that is absolutely free, that people should kind of like focus on heavily. A couple of tips for people if they do struggle with their sleep. So if possible, try and go to sleep and wake up at the same time every night. Your body will just get used to it and you start to get tired before that you do it. Make sure that your room is very, very dark, nice and cool. I know a lot of people will hate this, but no screens before you go to sleep. No tablet, no phone, no Kindle, no TV on in the room. Like it makes such a massive difference. Like you'll hear a lot of people talk about blue light and things like that. Like to your ability to fall asleep, going to sleep with the TV on is so bad, and things like that. If you can remove that, a couple of nutrition things that might be able to help you. If you have trouble falling asleep, obviously in the US, a big win that you guys have is you can get melatonin over the counter, like in a Walmart or wherever. Where we can't in the UK, it's a prescription medication. So yeah, which is crazy. But that's a massive one for you. Just like the dose that it says, which is generally 5 milligrams. If you are waking up a lot in the night, generally you go to the toilet and things like that, it is generally because you've got a magnesium or a heavy zinc deficiency. So what's happening is basically you are coming out of your like deep like sleep. So as you come out of your deep sleep, you're waking up, and then when you wake up, you think to yourself, "Oh, I need to go to the toilet." So your logical brain thinks, "Oh, I'm waking myself up to go to the toilet," but it's not. You're coming out of a deep sleep cycle, and then when you're awake, you think, "I better go to the toilet." So a good magnesium and zinc product, sometimes called like ZMA or ZMA, is a great product to have. A lot of like supplement companies, you'll be able to get that in any kind of like GNC. I think you guys have over there, which is a bit like in those kind of things, or like magnesium glycinate. Very very good to kind of like help dose like in that keep you asleep and give you like that good deep sleep. You may when you start doing it, you may start to get a bit of crazy dreams. It's just that because your body's sleeping so deeply, so you might have like some really random dreams where you've all of a sudden you have to start your first part-time job and you're arguing with your wife that you don't actually work there anymore and it then stresses you out and stuff. But I've heard some really random ones over the years, but it's a good thing to kind of get into those kind of things. So there's kind of a quick couple of tips for people who are struggling with sleep.
Well, I'll definitely, you know, utilize that information myself, because I'm that person who's like, oh, you know, I'm all right, and I'm not all right. But
Another good one is naps, actually, just while we're on it, kind of like naps are great, but people make a couple of mistakes with them. So they generally sleep for too long. So like, have you ever like had a nap and then woke up and felt really groggy and tired and you just can't get back into your day? It's because you sleep for too long and you go too deep into a sleep cycle. So you generally want to be only doing about 30 to 40 minutes or 90 minutes. Otherwise, you're not going to kind of like you're going to be waking yourself up like in a deep sleep cycle. Another tip that I stole from another coach, a guy called Will Dyson over here in the UK, is something he calls a nappuccino. So basically, what he does before his naps is he'll have a cup of coffee just before he goes to sleep. The reason being that like caffeine will take about 20 to 30 minutes before like it's actually effective in your system. So he'll have the cup of coffee and then go to sleep. But then when he's waking up 40 minutes later, his cup of coffee's kicked in and he's making him feel more awake. So it's like quite a good little hack that if you're, feeling a bit groggy afterwards to be able to have the nap, but then still keep going.
yeah, I like that. I I have trouble with naps. Like, I can't take them. Like, and if I do take even the tiniest nap, I'm awake. Like, later that night, I'm
Yeah.
wide awake, and so I just avoid naps at all costs. If it's the weekend and I've come back from training, I take my shower, I go find a task, I find something to do. Maybe let's go edit a podcast. Let's go down and watch some technique video, something. But I cannot take a nap, because if I take a nap, I will stay up all night, and then I go into Sunday now feeling like crap, and then I got to take another nap, and now we're going into Monday, and
Yeah.
it's a nightmare, huh? Pun. Um, so for nutrition, as I wonder about it and I think about it at times. I see a lot of information out there, and I know there are many different body types. Is there anything that's like relatively kind of like universal across the board? Because that's the headache that I run into so many times for everything. And I always say to my wife, there's just too much content. You would think there's no such thing, but it kind of is, because like you start seeing information that contradicts the other, and it's like, well, is this for me? Maybe it's not for me. I don't know what I should do. So is there like, as far as eating goes and like taking care of yourself nutritionally, anything kind of somewhat universal for the most part?
Yeah, so for some strange reason, nutrition is one of the weirdest culty like industries that there is. Everything like disagrees with each other. It's crazy, and it's generally because these people are trying to sell you something, like some version of a diet, or a product or something like that. So there's a great saying that you might have heard for that: a man who knows principles can pick his own methods. So it's kind of like if we apply it to jujitsu, which most of the audience will kind of think, it's basically like the nutrition version of it in jujitsu would be basically saying closed guard is the only guard that works and every other guard is rubbish and you can't do it. Only my guard is the best and everything else is ridiculous. That's not true at all. So it's kind of like what you need to do is actually we know the principles of a good guard. we need to control the person, we need to control posture, we need to make sure that we can like take away their balance or leverages or something that allows us to create an advantage. There's certain like principles in all guards that exist, and the methods of that changes depending on the person. So the same is with nutrition generally. Now, the thing about nutrition is, and this isn't, unfortunately, it's not very sexy. It's not like some kind of wonder diet or things like that. But the main thing with nutrition is consistency. Consistency kills. It's the same with training. You see those people who turn up 3 sessions a week, every week, never ever miss, and they progress over years, rather than the person who's like coming in, they'll do 5 sessions a week, and then 5 sessions a week, and then no sessions a week, and then 1 session a week, and then 5 sessions a week. Like the person who comes in and just 3 will outpace that person over time, because consistency kills. So what we need to do is, when we look at nutrition on a whole, is we need to look at what things we can be consistent with that are going to give us the biggest ROI or biggest return. So in kind of like order of magnitude is, if I had to pick where people could apply effort to get the biggest return, the first and biggest would be is find out how many calories you need as a person to maintain your weight. Now, this will involve like tracking what you eat and drink for, a week, maybe even 2 weeks, basically to get an idea of what it is. Now, when you're doing this tracking, it doesn't matter what you eat, as long as your weight's staying the same. We're not after certain types of food. We're not after you to kind of like skew this and all of a sudden just eating lettuce and chicken. You know what I mean? We want you to just eat normally, but track it all so you get an idea of what your calories are. Because when you've got that, you can then manipulate that to get the results that you want at any point. So that's like the first bit of information that we want to get. Second things to add on top of that is firstly would be protein. You want to kind of get 1 gram per pound of body weight through a variety of sources. And this can be completely personal preference. You get lots of different like kind of like animal sources are really good. Lean types of protein, you've got chicken, beef, eggs, like low fat yogurt's really good. All these kind of regular things that you hear of. And then after that, look at hydration. So you generally want to be having, I think it's about, I'll have to try and adjust this in my brain because you guys work off gallons while we do litres in the UK. So anything about 2 to 4 litres, which is about, I think, about half a gallon to a gallon, I think. Please do, if I've got that wrong, anybody listening to me, please don't string me up. I am so sorry. And then adding on that some kind of activity that you can regularly do consistently. When you can do those things consistently for a period of time, you can then start to adjust them and apply different methods. Now, the methods that you apply after that can be varied. It can be things like, intermittent fasting, carb backloading. It can be things like carnivore, if you particularly like that. These kind of things are methods that you can apply to get the results that you want. Generally, most people would feel the best eating, like I say, protein for 1 gram per pound body weight, split up anywhere between like in 3 to 5 meals. And that could be, like 3 main meals and 2 snacks. It could be lots of small meals. And it doesn't actually really matter how many meals that you have per day. This is done completely, again, like person dependent. Some people like really big meals and like I feel like satiated and full after the meals. So they may just like 3 big meals. Some people, like when they get hungry between meals, their willpower like goes to 0. So all of a sudden when they're hungry, they're like smashing through a vending machine because they can't like do. So they're better off having lots of little meals, every 90 minutes, like, because then they know that they've always got something coming. So it's not like they've got to wait another 2 or 3 hours when they get hungry. So that's completely person dependent. We know that eating basically a wide variety of fruits and vegetables is a great idea, and things like grains. So when you're thinking of fruits and vegetables, like lots of different colors, and again, a personal preference. Finding ways to cook all these foods that you actually like is the biggest hack, because the worst thing that you can do is try and force yourself to eat something that you don't like or is really bland tasting, like you will just fall off the wagon as soon as somebody presents you with a cheeseburger or a steak. Like it's just the way it is. But you can have a cheeseburger and you can have a steak like quite easily within these plans, or like a very well-rounded plan, as long as it applies to you're eating the correct amount of calories and you're having a good variety diet. You can easily do this. These are the kind of principles that we're looking at for how a good, healthy recovery. Now, as you go through certain times, you can start to apply certain things like eating a bit more on training days, like more carbohydrates, certain types of carbohydrates around training and things like that. You can start to layer in more areas of complexity. But if you kind of think of, so what we've got is kind of a scale, right? Like say you've got 0, which is a puddle of goo on the floor that's terrible, and then you've got 10, or 100, which is John Jones, okay? And like the highest possible performance ever. To get from 0 to 80 just requires you to be consistent regularly with these kind of things for the majority of the time. And that still allows you, like, every week to have foods that you like. You might want a couple of beers. You might want to go out for, dinner with your wife at the weekend. Like these things are very, very useful for it. But it's as long as the majority, like say 80% of what you're doing all the time, follows like these good, wholesome principles, that will get you a long way. But it's when you start to go above this 80 and go for really specific type stuff, i.e. the people in the top of the sport and things like that, you have to become a lot more like zoned in. But what we're after actually here is like habits. Unfortunately, this is not sexy. This isn't like some kind of wonder pill or like, crazy revolutionary thing that I'm going to tell people. But it is the truth. And unfortunately, like the truth isn't like sexy. Like if you find anybody like over a long period of time that's been in really shape and ask them, dude, what do you eat every day? He will tell you or she will tell you some version of what I've told you. Because adherence and consistency are the biggest things anyway. Like I can put anybody on a crazy diet and have them make huge loads and loads of weight in a very short period of time. Like vast amounts of weight. But as soon as they stop and they return to their regular life, it's all coming back because the consistency goes out the window. There's no habit space there. They're just straight away going down to like the drive-through and just eating everything that can outrun them and just drinking melted Ben and Jerry's because the restriction has been so big for them. So what you need to do is find a way that you can have these good principles, but also have some of the bits that you like. Like nobody ever wants to get to their deathbed and think, I just wish I had a cheeseburger. I can't believe that I never had a cheeseburger for like 30 years. Like that's not an existence anybody wants. You know what I mean? I want to go out for my wife and dinner. I want to have a nice glass of bourbon and a steak. But I also know that I have to have the majority of my time needs to follow like certain principles so I can be healthy in the other times. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question there. I'm really sorry.
No, that's perfect because I mean it covers all the bases. I mean, and it explains it, perfectly. I think about that, over the years, just with my eating habits, and when I felt like I was doing the best is when I was consistent. Versus when like there'd be periods where I would just sit there as I'm, tracking my calories. And one day I just say, why the fuck am I doing this? Fuck these. I don't know if these numbers are real. Like, and
Yeah.
then, I just fall off the wagon. But, you get to that point where you have to dial it back in. Hey, like recently, as I've kind of, I track, not all my numbers, but, a good amount of numbers every day, every week. And, my activity that I'm doing, I noticed I have a sweet tooth. I love
Yep.
me some candy. Uh, I've not seen a bag of Skittles that I didn't like. And there's one day I saw a share pack, and I'm not sure who came up with the term share pack because I don't share nothing. And I ate a whole bag of them, and then I got some Skittles gummies right after. And, I felt fine, I felt like crap, like as far as like the sugar crash, but I was still able to work out, the next couple of days, I still felt pretty good. But then now that craving came with all that
Yeah.
sugar. So now I want more of it and more.
Yeah.
And then, later in the week, I look at the scale and I'm like, oh, that looks weird. Considering like my water, you know, all my other foods are pretty intact, and then you add in, those bags of candy now throughout the week, and it's like, okay, this is why I have to pay attention. I have to stay consistent, and look at, like, for myself, I try to gamify things. Like I
Yeah.
look at, what I'm doing on, I have the chest strap to kind of track my calories burned and everything,
Hmm.
depending on what activity it is. And then I look at the day of what I've
Hmm.
eaten. I have an app, I think it's called Lose It, that I track everything through. And I kind of make it a little bit of a game each day as I'm eating. It's like, I want to make sure like I'm eating a good amount. You know, uh,
Yeah.
when I say a good amount, like good food, like, again, I love me some honey buns, but at the same
Yep.
time too, I look at the back of a honey bun is like 480 calories for one
Yeah.
honey bun. Is like, geez, Louise. And the question is like, well, what are you getting out of this? Well, nothing. You're just getting a bunch of sugar. Um,
Yep.
so when I see something like that, and then I put it into the app, and then that's where I start seeing these funky results, and it's like, okay, I got to get away from that because I want to win this game, and
Yeah.
I want
And
to feel good.
so, but you can game the game. So,
Mhm.
like, a good way to kind of think about calories, and this is why it's so important for everybody to kind of know where their maintenance level of calories are, because this allows you to start gaming the game. So, let's say that like, on Saturday or night, you want to have four honey buns and sit there and watch your favorite TV show, or Ring of Power that's going to come on if you're a big Lord of the Rings fan, and you've got to have honey buns, right? So you know that for let's say you're doing it on Saturday and you manage to wait a day, like some kind of unhinged person. But then for 6 days, what you need to do is you need to save up for, like, it's like 1,500 calories per chart of over that time. So let's say eat 2,500 calories a day, short maintenance, or whatever it might be. You know that you just need to shave off, 300 calories for those 5 days, and then you're going to have enough to have the honey buns. So you go, well, actually, when you start looking at it, actually, that's really quite easy. I just, 300 calories isn't much at all. It's like two Rice Krispie squares. Like, it's very easy for me to kind of, I won't even miss those calories really when I'm doing it because it's a small amount. But then I'll be able to have like the honey buns on the day. And we might get a little bit of a spike the day after because obviously it's quite a lot of carbohydrate to have. If you have quite a lot of carbohydrate, for every like 1 gram of carbohydrate that you have, your body will pull in like another 3 to 4 grams of water with it as well. That's why you kind of get big weight fluctuations. So you might see that on Sunday and Monday. But the trick is, and there's two types of people in this world, okay, when it comes to having sweet things. There's some people who can have their treat that they've waited all week for and go, that was really good. I really like that, but it's done. I can move on to it. These people are psychopaths and should never be trusted. Everyone else is basically, I've had this delicious thing. Fuck this. I'm eating everything that can outrun me. Like, this is kind of amazing. What am I doing? I should have all of this right now in case they run out. So, if you are this type of person, and you most probably are, because we all are as generally as human beings, make sure that when you are having this treat or the honey buns and things like that, it is your last meal of the day. You are going to do it and then go to bed. Also, that you do not have in the house more of them. So don't buy a pack of 8 and say you're only going to eat 4. No one fucking believes that. You don't even believe that. Like, it's so, just get the 4, and have nothing else in the house. Like, this is a bit harder if you've got kids and things like that, obviously, but don't have the extra stuff in the house if you're the type of person who's going to follow it on. You need to have the 4, watch whatever you're going to do, and then go to bed and then restart on the next day because you're not going to have the cravings and stuff. Um, so that's a couple of tactics that you can like try and do before it. And obviously have big meals so you feel quite full before you have them. Never ever be hungry before you start to eat like treat food. That's like the most ridiculous like thing in the world because then you're phoning for pizza after it and it's just like a spiraling thing. So but when you understand the game, and you can play the game, you can start to figure out how you're going to make this work for you in your life. And like I say, it might be honey buns. For a lot of people, it's having a couple of glasses of wine, on a night. Again, there's a big difference between a couple of glasses of wine and a couple of bottles of wine. Notice the distinction. Um, so when you know what the thing, like having that little bit of something that you really enjoy that allows you to be consistent for the rest of the time with great foods is a win. Like you don't get like an extra badge of honor by depriving yourself of things that you love unnecessarily. So there needs to be a certain degree of sacrifice, obviously, if you want results, because everything has a price. If you want, to wear this or perform this way or have these results, the price of it is X. The price that you pay might be different from the price somebody else pays. That sucks, but it's the universe. Unfortunately, it's not fair. You're either prepared to pay the price or not prepared to pay the price. It doesn't matter either way, as long as you're comfortable with it. But as long as you're prepared to pay the price, you can definitely find ways to have things that you want while sacrificing a little bit, but you don't have to give up on everything that makes your existence like terrible. Because when you're too restrictive, that's when you really fall off the diet bandwagon per se and go mad. Or like why diets really fail because they're massively restrictive. You need to find a way like to look at this as a long-term thing. And then you can have like times of like, especially for jiu-jitsu, I'm going to like drop a little bit of weight for competition, etc., or I'm going to move up and down weight class if you're competitive and things. But if you're not competitive, then what we're actually after is health outcomes and like how you look. We don't really care about weight because if I had like a magic wand and said to you, look, you can have the body of any superhero that you want. You can look like, Luke Cage tomorrow, right? But every time you sit on the scale, it's going to say that you weigh 1,000 pounds. You would be like, give me the Nick Cage. Sorry, the Luke Cage. Like, you wouldn't care less because you don't actually care about what you weigh. It's just an arbitrary number that you kind of assign yourself. Now, if you compete in weight classes and things like that, it's a very different thing. And obviously, that's my livelihood and a big thing that I do. But for most people, what we're actually after is physically how we look and the health outcomes that we get for it. So we don't want to beat ourselves up too much. What we're actually after is be able to build habits on a daily basis with some flexibility that gives us like to make it sustainable that we can do for a long period of time.
Yeah, I have a friend who they've kind of gotten out of this a little bit, but over the years, it was always a matter of, they had to weigh a certain number.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started training jiu-jitsu and the ideal of competing became a thing for me. And then the weight classes. And then now this friend and I were talking and they're saying, they had to weigh a certain number. And, I said, someone was like, well, are you trying to get to a certain weight for a competition? I'm like, well, no, I just, this is the number I want to be. And I was like, well, but at what, what risk? Because there's like back in the early 2000s, the Nicole Richie Skeletor look was the end look, and looking back on that, I was like, holy shit, we were stupid. Well, they were, not we, because I didn't do that. I ain't like that shit.
No. But people were calling them like fat and things like that. Like Nicole Richie was known as the fat one, which is just like mind blowing. You know what I mean? When you look back now. And a very, very and women have it so much worse than men. Obviously, it is getting a lot worse for men in terms of like body image and things like that. But that's like they assign like worth to what they wear on a scale, like they do, or dress sizes and things like that. Like the amount of female clients that I speak to, it was like, I want to be X size in this shop, and I'll be happy. When I can shop in here and I'll be able to pick up this size dress or whatever, then that is the goal of what I'm after. So that's like that's not really going to give you like the return that you want, because even though you feel great when you're at that size and you buy that dress, no one in the real world is going to ask you what size you are or what dress that you come from, or if it's weight. Nobody ever is going to come up to you and go, step on the scale for me so I can judge your worth. Like that doesn't happen. Like, so I understand why people have these goals, and it's definitely not down to me to kind of like say if the person's goals are good or bad, but it's kind of like if you can find a way to do it in a healthy way that ultimately they will be satisfied with at the end. You know what I mean? Like if certain people achieve that goal and it doesn't give them the thing that they want it to give them, that's whether it be self-worth or suds for accomplishment or things like that, then we need to find out what you're actually kind of looking for in this process, because you might not find it in this process. You know what I mean? Like it might be another thing that is well outside of my remit of, you know, being a nutritionist. So what you actually need to do is address what you're actually, you know, looking for through this process.
Yeah. My uncle once told me when I first started dating my now wife, he was like, here's some advice for you. And a good deal of my friends are females. So I took this advice with all of them. You know, don't argue with them. They say they want to weigh, 112. Say, okay, cool. Just be healthy about it and weigh 112. Um, there's a certain thing to that though with a couple of my friends where it's like, okay, cool. I support you, but it's like you're not being healthy about it. It's like, okay, this is starting to get, like along the lines of fad diets, like juicing and stuff like that. It's like, I got to argue now.
Yeah, and I see quite a lot of it. Like, what I see a lot happening is people coming to me and saying, "I've got a fight in so many days. You know, I've got X amount to lose. Can you do it?" Or or they come to me, especially like if they're female, and go, "This is what I'm currently doing. I need to fight on this date for this." But they're walking around like only eating like 800, 1,000 calories now. And I've kind of like got to turn around and I do a lot of people and go like, no, like this isn't what you need to be doing. And I can't like, take this on, and I won't. Like I don't take people on to make like weight cuts only and things like that. Because it's always a bad idea for a business and for the person. But what I see, like a recent example is I had a client come to me, MMA fighter, fighting regularly, had a look at everything, did a full evaluation, and she hadn't had a period for a long time. And I was like, okay, like, do you have a kind of medical condition that you're not telling me about? Like, and delve a little bit deeper into this. And she was like, no, it just stopped a while ago and it's just never come back. And I was like, the reason being is because you're fighting too often and your calories too low. You are like self-restricting yourself into bad health. If you want us to work together, then the answer is no fights, and we need to restore your health. So we need to get you back into a great healthy place where you're having good, healthy, regular cycles, good training performance, you feel great, eating a sensible and correct amount of calories. After we've done that for a period of time and you've gone through and had a number of cycles, then yes, we can start to look at taking fights again. But if you want to work with me, then this is what it is. And she said yes, and had to think about it and things like that. And it's like definitely not an easy process when kind of it's been beaten into people, especially like when it comes to food, like less is more. And it's like double for female fighters. But sometimes this is what it needs to be. Like that is something that's you're really going to see like negative health outcomes for female fighters who are literally just starving themselves between fights and really hurting themselves. And like I've seen some unbelievably stupid stuff from blokes as well. Blokes are generally a lot more stupid than girls.
That's a fact.
It is a strong fact.
So yeah, I know this these days in MMA, weight cutting has been kind of I guess, I mean, it's the standard thing across the board, but I heard like some outcry, specifically on Joe Rogan, they always talk about, weight cutting is it's harmful. Like, what are your thoughts on just kind of the weight cutting culture when it comes to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, MMA and stuff like that?
So as a whole, across all sports, it's terrible. It like weight cutting is very, very serious business. Put it this way, right? More people have died through bad weight cuts than have died in the UFC being elbowed in the head on the floor repeatedly into unconsciousness. So, and it's by a huge amount. Like weight cuts have killed lots more people. Mainly because the number for the UFC, like deaths in MMA, is 0. But it's still, it's very, very serious. When it's done correctly, it can be done safe or as safe as possible, which generally means that you're not doing very, very stupid things and doing it in a calculated scientific way. You know that kind of how much weight that you're going to take off on the run up to the fight, how much weight that you're going to take off by manipulating things like glycogen, which is stored carbohydrate in muscle, water in total amount in the body, like fiber and like food and digestive tract and things like that, but also how much you're going to be able to safely put back in and rehydrate correctly and things like that. So it can be done quite safely. If you don't do it safely, it can be really bad. Not only for like the risk of health that you run on the way down for the cut, it's that you can make yourself very, very ill, like trying to put too much water in too fast afterwards. And then if you're going into an MMA fight dehydrated, basically you are just increasing the amount of weight that you are going to take a very large amount of damage. Just you are not like for every 1% that you are dehydrated, you will lose 10% in performance. So like it's a big, big factor. It's a necessary evil of the sport. It's probably not going anywhere. Across the board of all organizations, all rules are different. One Championship's probably got it the best that I've seen when it comes to MMA, because they can only put on back on so much weight. They've got to be like certain weights throughout like fight week and things like that. They've tried to mitigate like really big cuts as much as possible. As far as jiu-jitsu goes, probably the best is the IBJJF, which is probably one of the only things that they do very well, is that you weigh in and then fight. So that discourages weight cuts like bad, but still loads of people do it, which is a terrible idea because you're never going to like you're going to basically in a competition probably get one of the worst performances that you get in the gym. And you really just like what a competition for is basically an opportunity to display skill level that you've built in the gym. And if you basically physically impairing yourself to be able to display that skill, you're never going to be able to perform to your best of your ability. So doing any kind of weight cut for a same day weigh-in a fight is a no-no. It is stupid. Do not do it. Unless like you like doing it like weighing in very early in the morning and fighting like later at night, which some MMA shows do. The wildest, but I don't think they do this anymore, used to be Naga, because you used to be able to weigh in day before at Naga, but also rock up on the day and fight and weigh in, and they would let you do both. So you would have people who would like weigh in the day before and then rehydrate. So let's say somebody who was like, might weigh in at like, 170, but they might come to fight at 200, but they're fighting people who weigh in on the day at 170. So you would have like weird looking categories where you would have monsters of humans fighting like smaller people. So that's a bad idea. A lot of bigger jiu-jitsu competitions like Polaris and things like that, they will do day before wins, which is great for jiu-jitsu. But a lot of them are basically should just do it just before you fight or a couple of hours before you fight to try and take that away. But I don't think it's going anywhere. It's been a part of all combat sports for like so long to try and get like no matter what the rules are, somebody will try and get some kind of advantage out of them when it is in competitive sport. But when it comes to weight cuts, it's one that can negatively impact your health. But you can get, great result. You can get like take off sufficient amount of body weight from somebody and put it back on and rehydrate them and fuel them up to fight. Like it is like, something that's can easily be done if you know the principles that are behind it. If I could not have it in sport, I certainly would. I don't think it serves the purpose that if people think it does, where people like it just makes the weight classes not actually really the weight classes. Fighting at 170 is really fighting at like 200. You know what I mean? And so on and so forth. So the way that they would overcome it is doing more weight categories. So you would have instead, but then the problem is there that you dilute the sport and people become less interested because there's more champions. So I understand why they don't do it. But I don't really have an answer for it as a whole. But the like, same day way into fight's probably the safest way you're going to do it.
Yeah, the weight cutting thing is, is just a thing. It's been here from the beginning. It'll be here until the end. And it's funny because it's like, if you think, okay, well, let's have, the guys that weigh 185, just
Yep.
185 outright, and you're fighting at 185. It's like, the results may vary. You
Yep.
may get some guys that come in at 185 and they feel great. Like, this is the
Yep.
best they've ever felt because they're not cutting. They just come in feeling good. You might get some folks that come in at 185 and they're kind of sloppy and sluggish, because they didn't have that additional cut to like kind of trim down. So, the results may vary, but it sucks because, like you say, you have people that do it in such a dangerous way, and they're damaging themselves, if not losing their lives. And the dehydration as well. You go into a fight not properly hydrated, and you get knocked out. Yucks.
Yeah, but sustain a lot more damage from the knockout than what you would normally. Your brain hasn't got as much of a protective cushion around it when you're getting, elbowed repeatedly in the head. But I've seen some crazy stuff. I've been at weigh-ins for shows and things like that, where people have been dragged out onto the scale, but then have to go to a hospital after, and then they can't fight. Like, a lot of people view the weigh-in as like a pre-fight fight, like it's a victory to make weight, where it should just be like another tick box that you do along the way, same as you do your training sessions along the way. But I speak to a lot of people as well, like you say there, who will do weight cuts, etc., but then go, look, just go into like the weight category, just do a competition and just go into the weight category above and try it and be fueled. Like, just try it. You know, people that do it and think, oh my God, like, this is like, I feel incredible doing it that way. And I was like, well, let's just always do it that way. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would, again, for jiu-jitsu and things like that, there's a big difference between dieting down into a weight category. If you're a couple of kilos, like a couple of pounds over, a couple of kilos over, or but weight cutting for jiu-jitsu competition, unless it's like day before and things like that, is you're not giving yourself the advantage that you think you are. In fact, if anything, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by doing it.
Like, I've seen folks, going to IBJJF competitions, the week of, just punishing themselves to get to whatever that weight is, plus the gi. And, the day of the competition, it's like, oh man, like, oh, your match is later in the day. That sucks. If it's earlier, it's like at the very least you get that out the way. Now you can go eat. But it's like, oh, like, you're not going on until 4. Yikes. So I don't know. It sucks, but like you said, it ain't going nowhere. It's part of the game, unfortunately.
It is, yeah. And a lot of people develop these habits like a white belt and blue belt and things like that. But generally, when you start to do competitions, your categories are first, like, and then it runs to black belt, which is last. So by the time you've ingrained these habits, like, you get a purple belt and you think, God, I have to wait around even longer or not eat all day. And then brown belt, and then you're like, oh my God, then I've got to wait even longer. And then I've got to get a black belt, and I'm not eating, like, say, like 4, 5, 6 o'clock. I'm one of the last ones on, especially if I'm like heavyweight or like, at that end, and I can't eat all day. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, and then I've got to go in with other killers. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bad idea, really. But, some people will hear you when you talk about it, and some people you might as well just be talking, some kind of crazy language.
When I was a kid, I was in the hospital a lot, and I would have to have surgeries quite often. And, with that being what it is, you can't eat for your surgeries. So you give me these like little lemon sticks. They're like these sponges with, like, I guess lemon juice, maybe some sort of lemon flavor. And as a little kid, it kind of tricks your mind. It's like, because it's just a flavorant. It's something to kind of pacify you. And I remember loving those things just because it was like, there'd just be, hours of like, oh my God, like my procedure is not until like, noon, and here it is. It's like 6 a.m. I'm a little kid. I'm awake. I'm like running around the hospital like, give me things to do. I need food too. And they're like, yeah, you can't have anything, but here's this lemon stick, chomp on this until it's go time. And, I think about that as an adult now, like, you don't have a match until like, later in the afternoon. Like, here, have this lemon stick. You'll be all right. The fuck is this? I need nutrients.
When we do obviously like bigger weight cuts for MMA fighters and things like that, one of the first things that they'll eat after the weight cuts is like fruit. The reason being it's very easily digestible, and fructose puts glycogen back in liver first and then muscle. So it's like a preferable way for you to start putting carbohydrate and good nutrients back into the system. So, but I always tell people, obviously, they've kind of had their food reduced. They've been quite restrictive coming into it, and then they've had to do a weight cut. And I always say, like, you don't believe me, but these pieces of fruit that you will have on the other side will be the greatest thing you will ever taste. Like, I promise you. And like, then the message me like after if I'm not there with them, and they're like, I cannot believe how good this apple tastes. Like, I have never had anything that tastes like this. Apples always tasted this way. And I was like, yes, you just kind of like, don't know. But actually, it's quite a fun thing that when you have like very restrictive diets, it's generally done like combat sports and things like that. It's more like in bodybuilding physique where they are very, very restrictive. Your taste buds become like so sensitive to things where like carrot sticks start to taste very, very sweet. Like ground pepper starts to taste like pepperoni and things like that. Like you become so finely tuned because your taste buds change so much. It's not something we normally have in combat sport because you never run things that low because it's so detrimental. But those guys don't have to perform; they just need to be shredded on stage, which is like a different thing altogether.
Yeah, like I think about when I get back home on Saturdays from training. It's usually like a long day, Muay Thai for an hour and then jiu-jitsu for an hour and a half, and then probably something prior to all of that, just kind of to wake myself up. So, it's like by the time I get home and, all that training has been done, my wife usually have like some strawberries or apples, off to the side, cut up for me. And it is like, I don't know, it's amazing. And any other day of the week, it's just strawberries. They're good, but on that Saturday, it's like these. I've never had anything as delicious as this strawberry right here. My daughter looks at me like, "Dad, it's just a strawberry." I was like, "You go fight off triangle chokes for 90 minutes. You tell me how good that strawberry is."
The good news is as well, the strawberries are so unbelievably low in calories. Like, you can have like pounds of them and they're nothing. There is quite a good theory of one of the reasons why we like have evolved to like sweet things, like obviously that comes from fruit, because obviously fructose and the sugars that are in fruit are very easable like uses of energy that we would find like if we were back when we were hunting and gathering. And also like the amount of vitamins and nutrients and things that would be in like fruit that's in season, because you would only get access to fruit that was in season where you were. Obviously, you couldn't get strawberries in the winter, etc., or depending on where you were in the world. So we kind of evolved that ability of like, this tastes really nice, we should eat this because it's really good, gives us good fast acting energy, load of nutrients. So it's where one of the theories of where like why we enjoy the taste of sweet so much. I don't know how true it is. Somebody's probably going to be like an evolutionary biologist and correct me on that, but I quite like the idea of theory. It makes common sense to me.
Yeah, no, I like it. It makes sense. And look, if somebody wants to come on here and dispute it, that's fine. Again, that just proves a point. You're listening, and that's what I want. Yeah. I want you to listen. I got your attention. One other thing I kind of want to ask about before we get out of here is thoughts on carnivore diet and things like that. With that specifically, I just had a friend on recently, and he's full on carnivore now, and he's seeing great benefits from it for himself. My argument always with anything, whether it's being vegan, being carnivore, being whatever it may be, is everyone's body chemistry varies. And I know for myself, I try carnivore and I know they're like, you got to give it some time. Your body, has to adjust. And I was like, I was not adjusting. It was not for me.
Yeah.
But
so
what are your thoughts on those?
Okay. So there's two kind of ends that can come at this from, and I don't mean to upset anybody in anything like that. If you love carnivore and it's getting you great results and things like that, and you are not hurting anybody, I do not care. Please continue. So the two ends that we can kind of go from is the individual side of it, as in a sample size of one person. You know, how you feel on a day-to-day thing of doing carnivore. Also, for how long you've been doing carnivore. You know, a couple of years is still a very, very small sample size because you could be on the planet for 80 or 100 years. So doing it for 2 or 3 years could be, you know, a very small sample size. And then there's what the scientific data tells us, where we look at kind of things like athletic performance and the use of carbohydrate versus, you know, carnivore and things like that. When it comes to the scientific literature, and what is the most preferable energy source for the human body and how we perform best on it, it is unbelievably conclusive that carbohydrate just massively outperforms fats as a primary function of like in exercise. There's many meta-analysis done of people of hundreds of thousands of people that have looked at like this data, and it is conclusive that it is a much preferred energy source for athletes. Now, if you as a person are trying it, try it and see the results that you get. What we're starting to see a lot online is like a lot of like diehard carnivore people are now doing things like carnivore plus, or they are reintroducing fruit and honey around like workout times and things like that to see how they feel, and are feeling very, very good for it generally. I would apply common sense to this. Like, if I know that there's no way that a diet that is devoid of fruits and vegetables can be as healthy as one that has lots and lots of micronutrients in it. It's not just a case of like certain things. Like, it's the meta-analysis that have been done on it is absolutely huge. Now, for anybody listening, what like depending on how educated you are on scientific studies and things like that, again, I am not a scientist, but you can cherry pick individual studies to pretty much prove anything in a vacuum. That's no problem at all. But what a meta-analysis of studies is where it looks at all the body of information, every study that's available, and then draws conclusions from all those studies based on the validity of the research that's done. And that includes things like who funded the research, etc., the methods that were used, the sample size of the people that were used, etc. So meta-analysis looks at all and then draws conclusions from that. So the meta-analysis of this body of work basically draws conclusions that carbohydrate is a superior energy source for athletes or anybody who's doing any kind of athletic endeavor. And also the data when it comes to like things like we call it like all-cause mortality, where basically how long you live for, chances of death from any kind of things like that. Like the amount of fruits and vegetables that you eat is like correlated with longer lifespans is again very, very conclusive. The meta-analysis is very, very clear on that. Now, if for some strange reason another meta-analysis is done tomorrow and looks at it and that proves that actually carnivore is superior because of X, Y, and Z, then I would look at that and I would change my opinion. Now, I am not one way or another. A recent example is for a very, very long time, would recommend collagen protein, not for muscle building, but for increasing health and recovering tendons and things like that and connective tissues. But a recent study's come out and like a review of that study is being done, where basically it turns out that is not the case. So I've changed my mind. I've looked at the evidence that was from, and the things that I was saying a month ago, I no longer believe because the evidence has been presented and I've changed my mind on that. If that happens because of carnivore, then I would absolutely do that. And I've done it many times throughout my career. But currently, the weight of evidence shows us that on everything, like if we're looking at something that works generally for all people for a large body of size, that is worth saying. Exceptions do not prove rules. So if it's working for 1, 2, 3 people, like I'm not saying it doesn't work for them at all, but statistically across the board, that is statistically what we call insignificant because the sample sizes are so small. You know what I mean? Like you can find people who smoked 100 cigarettes a day and live to 100 years old, but we know that smoking is not good for you. just because that one person managed to do it doesn't mean that people should do it, because we know the scientific literature tells us that smoking is a bad idea. So if you are doing it and you feel great and your health is great, and by what I mean, like, your health is great, is that you get regular blood work done, that your cholesterol and everything is in a good place, that, you know, that your physician is reviewing things like your blood pressure, your fasted glucose. These are the things that will really point towards if you are actually healthy, not just if you're feeling it. And that's all great. Continue, please. I am not the nutrition police, and I honestly don't care what you are doing. What I need to do in my job is basically look at the literature that will cover the most amount of people, that will allow me to make decisions based in the most effective way possible. And that's the same with any kind of fad diet. That's the same with intermittent fasting or fasting. You know, it like includes, you know, carnivore, keto, carb backloading, all these different things. I will also say, as a little caveat, I do have clients that prefer to eat in a carnivore style, despite me presenting like a thing going, look, this is like what the evidence is, like, you know, this is what, you know, if you wanted to do it optimally, this is what I believe it should do it. And they're like, no, my personal preference is I would rather be doing this. Great, we will do that. They're not hurting anybody. It's, as long as we keep an eye on everything, it's not detrimental to their health or anyone else's, crack on. Just like, it is fine. But if basically you brought me an athlete and said, you have to get results out of this person, otherwise I'm going to kill your children, I'm not putting them on carnivore. And I would actually challenge you to find any someone who works in sport with a variety of sports people who actually, under those situations, would put it on carnivore. That isn't trying to sell you a carnivore product or a carnivore plan. I don't want that to come across as sounding very harsh, or that I'm attacking people who do carnivore and things like that. I'm really not. What you eat is no reflection of what you are as a person, believe it or not. Like, you, I'm not attacking you as a person or attacking carnivore, really. I'm just like, this is what the data says, so I make informed decisions based off scientific data.
I think that's, you know, the big thing there is, you know, just what the data says. You know, it, again, you know, it works for some folks. You know, lots of different things work for lots of different people. As I like to always say, you know, we're all very different. So we're all going to react to things differently. I had a young lady on the podcast, I want to say it was episode 14. And you know, she was on the carnivore diet and she swore by it. And this was still relatively new to me. And having her come on and talk about it, it was just like, okay, this doesn't sound quite like I need to know more outside of this conversation, because what you're presenting to me, the way it was being presented, was essentially like everyone should be doing this. And whenever anything is presented that way to me, I get a little like, okay, because again, not everyone's body, you know, responds to certain things certain ways. You know, you got folks who, you know, are vegans and it works great for them, may not work great for others. So
exactly,
you know, that, you know, just hearing that, you know, and also, you know, like you said, if you were to see evidence that said otherwise, you know, I think it's very important for people to be able to change their minds and you know, with new evidence presented, because, you know, we got a long life here, most of us. So, you know, not everything's going to stay the same, you know, like, you know, Fruity Pebbles tasted a certain way when I was a kid. They don't quite taste that same way anymore, because ingredients may have changed. My taste buds may maybe changed, or maybe I just don't like Fruity Pebbles anymore. But the point is, things change, and, you know, it's fine to, you know, change your mind on something if you're presented with better evidence, you know, whether it be having opinions about certain comic book movies that I had opinions about. And now that I've gotten to look at things as an adult, it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe I never thought of it that way, or maybe now knowing this behind the scene thing. And that's the same thing with nutrition and exercise and fitness and jiu-jitsu.
It is, yeah. Like, and everybody should change their mind as they get older. Like, anyone who believes the same things that they did, like, when they were younger, hasn't grown in any kind of way. Like, back when I was younger, like, I really didn't like the Phantom Menace the first time I seen it. Now I know I was wrong. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, It's that kind of thing. I would say to anybody also listening, anybody that you ever hear talk about, whether it's nutrition or training or jiu-jitsu or lifting or anything like that, if they speak in absolutes, this is the only way to do it. Beware that person. Like, because nothing exists within a vacuum like that. You'll notice like one thing across, like, it doesn't have to be me, but any like nutritionist or trainer and things like that, if you ask them a question, they will always go, it depends, because there's a lot more nuance that kind of works with into individuality between people and their own personal circumstances and things like that. But we do, when we're coming to conclusions of what to do on the whole, we have to look at generalities. Again, I know people who get absolutely hammered 3 or 4 days a week and are beasts on the mats. Like, we know that that's not a great idea. Again, the smoking thing, we know, like, loads of people before, like, drinking and driving became illegal. Everybody did that, and it was like, why would you ever make drinking and driving illegal? That's crazy. But now, obviously, we look back and go, it's a horrific idea to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's we make our decisions based on the evidence that we have, or we should. Or basically, if anybody makes extraordinary claims, it should be like, well, I need to see kind of evidence beyond that. Like, the sample size that you have is of one person. Like, I need proof, because if we don't need proof, then I'm going to come up with a nutrition plan and sell it that basically says that celery gives you laser vision. Like, and like, I require no proof, like, to sell it. Like, so, it's like, it's not a thing. So, yeah, that's kind of where I am on that. If your previous guest is listening to this, please, and people get so weird about this, so I've really got to kind of, I am not attacking you as a person. Like, I have no idea who you are. I'm sure you are a beautiful, lovely human being that loves steak and eggs. But like, I'm just not like an overall fan of it, to be honest. But I would change it again. I would change my mind in the thing of a meta-analysis that looks at all, not just individual studies, because I can find individual studies that like will say things are good and bad like equally, and you can play the ping pong game forever. It's why we must look at the body of evidence and make conclusions based on that, i.e., like meta-analyses of work.
Absolutely. I always like to say, when asked anything, one way or the other, I always say, look, this is what's worked for me. Yep. I can't say what's going to work for you, but this has worked for me. And, or if I've seen any additional information and I don't have personal experience. And I think sometimes we as humans need to kind of accept the fact that it's okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah. And
that's the thing too.
Especially like, the day of like, especially like social media and things like that, like we've got a really weird trend now where we read something on social media and then we regurgitate that as though that's our knowledge. You know what I mean? It's like, I have read this or watched it. Like, also, most people don't know what evidence is. They're like, oh, well, I saw this YouTube video. Like, a YouTube video isn't evidence. I can make a YouTube video tomorrow that says you eat puppies. Like, that doesn't mean that it's like the truth. Like, and we've got to kind of get away from being able to do that. It's like, everybody can have an opinion, but it doesn't mean their opinion is worth anything. Like, my opinion on how to play guitar or fly a plane is worthless. It is zero. Like, I can read every single like book on playing a guitar. I can watch every single YouTube video. I can know everything about every guitar. But if I cannot play a guitar, my opinion is still worthless on how to play a guitar. So there is a big difference between just regurgitating information and actually understanding and like having knowledge, which we're still all like guilty of. Like, our recent, like, I won't go into it because it's like a quite political thing, but there's a recent thing where I kind of like got suckered into repeating information, but then actually when I looked into it, it wasn't correct at all. But I'd repeated the information before I'd even fact checked it, which is like a thing that we all do as humans, but it's something that we should all kind of not do or be very, very kind of open of, especially like in the social media age, etc.
I have another podcast where we review beers. that's what we say it's for. Really, it's just us talking shit. And I make it very clear that anything that I'm going to say on that show has not been fact checked. As a matter of fact, my wife got upset when I told some story about it. She was like, "Do you even know if that's true?" And I was like, "Honey, listen, I'm podcasting. And when I'm podcasting, I never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So I don't know if it's true or not, but we had a good time laughing about it when we were drinking and talking about it. And you know what? So whenever we do that show, the Colompton Bear Club, we say don't ever quote us on anything there, because I can tell you right now, half the shit that I say on there ends up I don't even know who we're talking about. We're talking about selling comic books, and I ended up somehow getting into a rabbit hole of talk about glory holes. So you can never trust anything I say when I'm over there. So the point that I'm getting at is, look, know your sources. And I'm not one of them.
Yeah, fact check. Like, yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, Mike, this has been great. I'm so glad that we connected here, because like whenever I'm going to sit down with somebody for the first time, I'm always nervous, because I'm like, man, like I don't know what to ask, because like I said, I'm not an interviewer. I just have conversations. So I'm always worried about, like, hopefully, we kind of connect on something, whether it be sense of humor or, the information that we're both, discussing. So thank you so much for sharing, your knowledge. And honestly, for me, like I said, this is the year of making Dante better, and you're along that tour and just help me out with some things. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, buddy. It's been a blast. I've really, really enjoyed it.
No problem ever. And I definitely want to have you back on, because we've got unfinished business here, my friend. But before we get out of here, do you have any shout outs or mentions or links that you want to shout out and let the listeners know about?
Not so much. If you want to talk to me about anything, you can find me on most platforms as Unorthodox Nutrition. Website is unorthodoxnutrition.co.uk. If anybody ever needs me to ask a question or look at anything or ask me opinion on it, like I regularly do Q&As and stuff, or just drop me a DM. I'm always happy to help anybody with anything. So if you need anything, just shout me out. I'm always helping.
Awesome. I'll be sure to get your links, put them in the show notes, and get you connected. And as always, for the listeners, thank you so much. We appreciate you. If you got any questions, concerns, criticisms, anything, let me know. I'm here. You can find me at bjj.wiki on Instagram, and also on Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram. And this is going to be one of these moments where I normally say don't email me, because I don't trust emails. But look, Mike emailed me. I saw that shit and I was like, the fuck is this? And then I started, it was like, oh, this is like an actual person. This isn't a Nigerian prince. They're not trying to rob me. So you can go ahead and email me too at offthematch2020 gmail.com. If you got any questions, concerns also, or want to be a guest, reach out to me. I'm here for the people. I love you guys. Want to give a big shout out to my crew over there at Nerd Rage Radio: Bobby, Chris, Joe, Ricky Ticky, Maryland, Phil, Chucky O, Raul, everybody. We love you guys. If it wasn't for Nerd Rage Radio, I wouldn't be doing a podcast, because they didn't want to talk about my shit. So I just said, fuck it, I'm gonna go do my own thing. And here we are. So thanks to those guys. Unless you don't like the show, then go send them hate mail, I guess. Also want to shout out my other podcast. So you like horror? If you're into scary movies, go check it out. I'm not quite sure where we're at right now, because we had some hiccups and we're changing some episodes around, but we're definitely going to stick with the cursed film thing for 2024. We're going to begin to Poltergeist and Exorcist along that line, and the curses that surround those films. So go check those out in the coming weeks. And also shout out to the Colompton Bear Club. I don't normally shout us out over there, because sometimes the stuff we talk about, I don't know, man. Like it gets a little questionable, and I don't know. Don't let your kids be around when that's on. And last but not least, let's give a big shout out here to our guest here, Mike Leng. See, I had to say that slowly because I felt like I was saying Mike Leng. Mike, like
Yeah,
little Mike.
yeah, a
Um,
little bike will do. It's everyone expects a Chinese guy with my last name, and a bit disappointed when I tell them.
what's funny is I don't know why I didn't. I saw the name and I was just like, I think because as I was reading the email, like I was picking up on certain, was like, I think he's from the UK. We're gonna go with that. And then once we
Yeah,
got to talking about the times, I was like, yep, I got it. I know,
yep.
I knew it all along. But thank you, Mike, for doing this again. We do appreciate you, and we definitely want to have you back on and talk some nerd shit and probably some more nutrition and jiu-jitsu because we didn't really dig like deep into that. So but we definitely want to have you back, and we definitely appreciate you.
Would love to, bud. Would love to.
Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. And to the listeners, we love you. Thank you. You know the deal. You guys keep listening. We're definitely going to keep making these shows. Thank you, everybody. And ciao.
They with it. Now let me sing a song.